All right, let's get this show on the road. Hello, everybody. My name is Brad Carlin. I'm a senior consultant for TRG Arts, and I'm coming to you live today from a pre-dawn Austin, Texas, to help you walk through our latest updates to the COVID-19 benchmark through TRG's partnership with Purple 7. And joining me today, as last time, is my pal David Brownlee. David, say hello.
Good morning, Brad. Hello, everybody. I'm David Brownlee. I'm Director of International Strategy for TRG Arts, and I'm coming to you from a sunny and tourist-free Edinburgh.
So, David, it feels like days since we were here last. Why are we here again so soon?
Because I'm delighted to say that we are going to be able to share with you two new major developments within the COVID benchmark dashboard.
All right. Well, before we dive in, just orient everybody real quick. Take a look at your screens. I know Zoom has probably become very familiar to us all in these times, but just a reminder, down at the bottom of your screen, you'll see a couple of speech bubbles with Q&A underneath. Feel free to send questions along. David and I will get to them towards the end of the webinar today, but you may submit them at any time as they pop up. And otherwise, I think I'm ready to dive in and see what we've got here. David, where are we going first?
Wonderful, Brad. We are going to go to our key metrics dashboards, which we all remember from the last time we were here, but things have changed. So let me share now. There we go.
All right.
So this will, I hope, look recognizable to anybody who took part in the last webinar and has spent some time looking at the dashboards, but things have changed and things have grown. The first place that I draw people's attention to is the right-hand side of the screen, where we now have an embedded video, which is an edit of our first webinar from a week or two ago, which explains the background to the benchmark and also takes you through some of the elements of the key metric screen in front of you as well. I'd also whiz us down to the left-hand side again, remembering we're looking at a particular type of organization. And again, that typology is explained within that video. But today, for the first part of the presentation, we're looking at a large presenting organization. And I should also flag that up at the top left-hand corner, if you're seeing this smaller on your screen when you turn this on, if you click on the Open a New tab, it makes it wonderfully large and easy to read and gets rid of all the little stuff around the sides.
Great. All right. Thanks, David. Oh, security coming in. While you're logging in, I've got a question has come in about a multi-venue art center that's being compared to a concert hall. And so I know, David, this is something that we can ask folks to send us a note through the dashboard to help us if we need to reassign what you're being compared to, what your comparison group is. It's easy enough in some cases for us to make those adjustments.
Absolutely. And at the moment, we have 7 different categories plus an other category. And within that, concert halls is one of the categories. And I know that there are some organizations that are multi-venue art centers that have concert halls as part of those. If you're an organization that doesn't think that that's the appropriate place for you and would prefer to be somewhere else, just let us know through the Tell Us Your Questions box and we'll move you into the right place.
Yeah, so they're like the buckets are things like producing organizations, large, medium, small, presenting organizations, large, medium, and small, other genres, I'm sure. So it would be just a matter of an organization reaching out and telling us where they think they may fit best.
Absolutely. So we're back in again. And I'm going to open a new tab. Here we go. And it all gets bigger. And there we go. So the first place we're going to stop off today is this new box down here called Customer Typology. And I'm going to read this out. Active was your most active segment and accounted for 34.7% of bookers over the last 30 days. New customers was the most active segment in the selected benchmark and accounted for 28.1% of bookers over the last 30 days. Does that make complete sense to you, Brad?
Very little, David. I think I could use with a little more insight.
I could understand that. So I'm going to stop sharing and flick us back to our presentation again and take you through what this segmentation is all about.
Great.
So if you think about all of your future customers and their booking history, some of them will be new bookers. The events they will have booked for, it's the first time that they've booked for you, and therefore they're new customers. A big chunk of your customer base will have attended something in the last 18 months, and we'll come back to them in a second. There'll be some people who have attended previously, but over 18 months ago, but less than 3 years ago. And in our segmentation, we call those stale. There'll be lots of arts organizations that think I am stale.
Mm-hmm.
And anybody who hasn't been for at least 3 years, but has now made a booking, is somebody who has lapsed, who has come back. Okay? So new customers, stale and lapsed. Within the 18 months category, we've got 4 different classifications. If you've been once before and you're coming back again, you are once before. If you come twice before, you've become a convertee. If you've been 3 to 9 times before, you're active. And if you've attended the specific venue at least 10 times, you're super active.
But only one of those needs to be in the last 18 months. Oh, perfectly timed.
Absolutely.
Animation, David, I love it.
Absolutely. So I could be super active, but only have been once in the last 18 months because my other 9+ attendances have been more than 18 months ago.
Got it.
So it's a simple and straightforward approach to segmentation based on my level of loyalty to this organization. So what we need to remember, new customers, once before, convertee, then we move into people who are really active, and then the super active. And then if I haven't been active, if I haven't done anything for 18 months, if the gap since my last attendance is between 18 months and 36, I'm stale. If it's more than 3 years, then I've completely lapsed.
And so we can remember that the classification we see in the benchmark tool is defined by essentially the very moment before they made the booking, their most recent booking, right? That is what we're seeing when I look back at this dashboard insights screen and I'm looking at customer typology. It's making a lot more sense to me now, David, that an active booker refers to, that's my largest segment over the past 30 days, but anyone who is active meant that they had had at least that one engagement within 18 months, that one purchase within 18 months before their most recent purchase.
Indeed, that one bit within that 18 months, but overall, they've done between 3 and 9 bookings, right, in terms of their history with you as an organization.
Right.
So these are absolutely fans of the organization. These are loyal customers who have come at least 3 times to the organization in terms of their booking history. Key thing with the dashboard is, am I normal? And this organization is not normal because compared to the rest of the large presenting organizations, their biggest segment is actually new customers who accounted for 28.1% of bookers. So is this organization normal? No, it's not. It's doing particularly well in terms of engaging its active customers. So if we click on our box, we go in and we get some more detail. And what we see here is the relative numbers of bookers, and key to this is bookers, not tickets sold, for each of the different segments. So what we're seeing here, as was just described in the summary, across the segment, across the benchmark, the most the segment with the highest proportion of bookers is new customers, 28.1%. However, for this organization, it's just 15.1%. And then we move over and look at the actives and the super actives. The actives across the benchmark, 22.4%, but this organization, 34.7%. And again, the super actives, so those people who've been 10 times or more before, accounting for 27%, as opposed to almost exactly 20% for the segment. So Brad, as a TRG consultant, what would you be saying if you saw this in a client's figures?
Well, the first thing that jumps out at me is the relative success that they're having with their most loyal customers compared to others in the benchmark, the active and the super active. My instinct here would be that this is an organization that has invested in loyalty, that has invested in being able to easily retain and attract their most loyal customers. I would also note, though, that it seems as though there's perhaps opportunity for this organization to think about their stale segments, their lapsed segments, where they're maybe underperforming in the benchmark just a bit, and a particular question around new acquisition and trying to understand. I'd want to dig a little deeper there, David, to figure out what is, how is this different? Not only is it normal, I can see how it's normal compared to the benchmark, but what would it have been, or what would their proportions have been in other times, in more normal times?
That's a really good question, Brad. And I will get there in approximately 1 minute. I'll just before we do go there, let's look at this gray box here, segment definitions. If we click on this, that just reminds us what all these different segments are. If we look a bit further on the right-hand side, this information here is what you saw on the key metrics box. And then this is new information that we're seeing down here, which is about not bookers, but tickets and the proportions of tickets sold. And it's interesting that our super actives, 34.3% of tickets sold. So although there are less bookers, they represent the highest performing segment in terms of numbers of tickets.
So David, that's a good tie into a question that we've got around being able to, look at segmentation about, a booker that has booked lots of events in one transaction, i.e. for like a festival or a season. Does that count as one, or how many instances? And I can see maybe in that tickets box in the bottom right-hand side, we would get a sense of the volume of tickets that they would have purchased. But in terms of reflecting their activity as an active booker, or wherever their segmentation lies, it would be based on the transaction, right? Of that booker, of that household.
Okay, so this is the number of bookers. So whether they've booked once or whether they've booked 5 times, they are a booker once within that. There's the number of bookings they made, which we're not tracking. And then there's the proportions of tickets they sold, which we are tracking down here.
Right.
So we're saying that, super actives are high in terms of the proportion of bookers, but they are booking more tickets as well. They have a higher numbers of tickets per booker. Actives, although they account for 34.7% of bookers, they only, it's very similar, but only 33% of revenue. But that's a higher revenue than the super actives. And that means that our actives are paying more per ticket. So it's likely that our super actives are taking advantage of bundles of tickets.
Yeah, some package discounts. Yeah.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, not surprisingly, lapsed was your least active segment and represented 0.4% of bookers, which is low, but it's probably the lowest one for virtually every organization. Once somebody hasn't been for 3 years, you're very unlikely to get them back again. Coming back to your question now, this figure for new customers, it's really high in terms of the benchmark. 28.1% across the benchmark are new customers in an unprecedented period of challenge for the performing arts sector. Is that historically high? We can answer that question by clicking on the Change Index tab up here. And that shows us both for this organization, this anonymous organization that we're looking at, and for the benchmark, how are we doing in the last 30 days compared to the same period last year? And what we find is, if we look at the green line for the benchmark, although that 28.1% seems really high, actually it's 11.1% down on what was happening last year.
Yeah, it was even higher a year ago.
It was even higher. And what we're seeing is that across the benchmark as a whole, what's growing are the actives, the super actives, and interestingly, the stales, although they're not growing nearly as much as we're seeing within this individual organization.
So again, another really interesting example with this organization, David, about the strong work that they're doing to connect with their most loyal customers. And even though they are behind in the benchmark in terms of the proportion of new customers that have booked in the past 30 days, relatively, their decline in new customers from the year before is not that far off their peers in the benchmark. This is an organization that has, it looks like, at least within the past year, traditionally would have less acquisition and perhaps would skew more towards having a higher proportion of more loyal customers than their peers.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what the data is telling me too. Again, we've got our segment definitions box here, but if we go to the right-hand side of the screen, this is where we see that there is a degree of normality with this organization. In your organization, super active was the segment that showed the greatest growth, 13.2%, and across the benchmark as a whole, super active has seen the greatest growth of 3.7%.
Right.
And then we need to start talking about cakes, Brad.
Yeah, there needs to be cake.
There needs to be cake. We are not comparing carrot cake with carrot cake. We are comparing carrot cake with fairy cake. This organization is, again, doing comparatively well in very strange times. That its cake has shrunk by 89% in terms of size since this point last year. So whilst we're seeing a higher proportion of superactives, for example, in actual number, it's way, way, way lower.
Right, and that's the startling and stark reality that many organizations are in. So while we are able to see glimmers of optimism and good news in here in terms of what is growing and where we are finding connection with loyal customers in this particular case, it is not enough to make up for what are pretty staggering and sobering declines year over year in the volume of both tickets and revenue.
Absolutely.
And are there lost months here, David?
Lost months we're going to come on to in our next section, but this is probably a good point. If there are any other questions that have come through, we'll take questions now on typology before we go on to our new advances tab.
I don't have any questions that have come through about additional questions that have come through about typology.
That's great. I then need to just do a bit more whizzing around to take us to...
Doesn't mean, of course, if you don't have questions, you can't send them through. And of course, there will be opportunities for you to send questions afterwards after you've had a bit more time, everyone, to get in there and drive around a bit in the new insights as part of the COVID-19 benchmark. If there are questions that come up, there's an opportunity to submit them right there in the dashboard. There are also ways for you to be able to engage in questions with the rest of the TRG consulting team on our LinkedIn network, and we'll talk a bit more about that in a moment. So Here we are back at the main landing dashboard, key metrics here, David, and we've looked at customer typology, but I see another new insight.
Yeah, indeed you do, Brad, and we're looking at a different anonymous organization here.
Okay.
I've been given two today to go through because they tell us different stories in different ways. Again, a reminder that if I click our open a new tab here, like magic, it gets bigger and easier to read. And first thing always to look at, left-hand side here, we've moved from that large presenting house into a medium producing house.
Okay.
And interestingly on this, I'm not going to spend a long time here, but customer typology, you'll see that this organization, 26.6% of its book is a super active. For the medium producing benchmark, it isn't new customers that's the biggest segment, it is super active.
So this particular organization is a bit more in line with the benchmark than the last organization we were looking at.
Indeed, although it's showing that its proportion of super active bookers was lower than the benchmark.
It's a bit lower.
The highest, but it's lower than the benchmark.
Yeah.
But we're not looking at typology now, we're looking at advances. And in terms of the key metric, we've chosen something which might sound a little bit odd in terms of what it is that we are measuring and putting on this key metrics dashboard. And that is focusing on Q3. So if we think about the year in financial quarters, April, May, June, Q1, July, August, September, Q2, October, November, December, Q3. So what this is showing us is for October, November, December, as of midnight last night, what have we got in the bank for shows that are taking place in October, November, and December 2020? For this organisation, it's just under £27,000. For the average across all medium producing organisations, for October, November, and December, is just over £26,000, meaning that this organisation, compared to its peers, is very slightly higher.
So why is this important, David? Why are we interested enough in advanced sales for Q3 to put it right here on our key metrics dashboard?
There are lots of reasons why advances are really important. We rely on advances as a sector in terms of cash flow and keeping things running smoothly. But I think as things progress and we move from where we are now into recovery, seeing where customer confidence lies is going to be really important. And tracking advances and seeing where customers are booking, which months they're booking for, how far ahead, is going to be really important to us too.
I see. Thanks.
So let me click on this box and take you in through to some more detail. So we start off with this organization and comparing this organization for this year compared to where it was at this point last year. So we've got to get our heads around a few difficult concepts here. The first key one being that what we're not seeing here is the number of sales you had in any particular month. We're seeing at this particular moment this year and the comparative moment last year, what sales had you taken? Okay. So this is not showing where this organization got to at the end of December or January. It's showing that at this point, that was its advanced sales. And this explains the incredible magical disappearance of November. November isn't here for a good reason. And that's not because this organization didn't sell any tickets for November last year. It did. It's just by the 27th of April, it hadn't sold any tickets for November. And therefore it's not showing up.
Nor has it sold any for November this year.
For this year either, yeah. So when you go into your dashboard and if there is a magic disappearing month, this is the reason why that's the case. And as soon as we get to the point where you either sell a ticket this year for that month or we get to a point where last year you had sold a ticket, it will magically reappear.
I see. Okay.
Okay. Now, taking us through, this is giving us a 13-month picture of how we are doing comparatively for each month. So we're starting off here in this quarter, the first quarter of 2020, comparing it to the first quarter of 2019. And you'll see that for this organization, at this point last year, they had £4,784 in the bank for shows that had yet to be staged in April. So basically things that will be on the 27th, the 28th, 29th or 30th. This year, they have still got some money in the bank. That show will not be going on. We know that as a fact. So for whatever reason, they've still got some balances in shows that are not going to be happening and that are going to have to be refunded or credited or donated or whatever. And that is probably the case for May and for June as well. So whilst we're seeing an advance here, which is feeding into this organization's overall advance, actually those figures are pretty meaningless at this point because it seems unlikely that the show will go on.
Right.
And this is why we have instead focused on quarter three, looking at October, November, and December, because if we look at those 3 months with our fingers severely crossed, maybe we will be seeing some activity in our theatres and concert halls and art centres.
So even though the key metrics dashboard, the summary of this particular insight distills and summarizes advanced revenue for quarter three, when a user is looking at this more detailed view of advanced sales, they will be able to see the revenue compared to last year at this time for other parts in the year beyond, prior to quarter three and well into Q4, right? But we're choosing to focus on quarter three for the purposes of summarizing this particular metric because of where we see the opportunity, where we see organizations focusing, and where we know there is, and you can see it here for this particular organization, normally a pretty high proportion and pretty high volume of revenue that's coming around holiday time.
Absolutely. So this organization traditionally has had a really, really strong advance for around the Christmas period in December and also flowing into January as well. It's clearly got something that is very popular and has sold substantial volumes of tickets for this year, but just nothing like it's done previously. We'll compare to the benchmark in a second. If we just go right a little bit, first of all, we can see at the moment, we can see revenues. If we click on this yellow box, we can show ticket sales instead. To the revenues again. And then let's go through the key metrics on the right here. This organization on the 27th of April in 2019 had in the bank just under £605,000 of advanced sales for performances ranging from the 28th of April to whenever it is in the future. Could be a year, could be 2 years, could be 3 years in advance, but that's what they had banked up. This year, they've only got 254,000 in the bank going forward. And with that caveat that some of those are for things that we are pretty sure isn't going to happen. But that then shows that for this organization, their advance, the cash that they've got available is around £350,000 less than it was at this point last year. Breaking that down into quarters, in the current quarter, the advance is down by 52.4%. Again, I would say that's probably a dubious figure because it's banking on shows that may well not be going on. But then for the next quarter, so that's for July, August, September, they're down just about 80% compared to last year.
Interesting.
If we click on your organization compared to the benchmark, we get some slightly more heartening reading. So yellow is this organization, green is the average of medium producing theatres. So for this organization, their advance is 254,000 at the moment, compared to their peers of medium producing theatres. Actually, they've got 112,000 pounds more in the bank than those peers. And then looking specifically at those Q3 figures, just drilling down to October, November, December, magically we see that November reappears here, because even though this organisation hasn't sold any tickets for November, its peers have done.
Others have, yeah.
And we're seeing that across that quarter, they are very marginally up on the benchmark in terms of revenue. And again, we can also switch up here into ticket sales. And that shows that, again, actually in terms of ticket sales, probably significantly less than the benchmark, which would suggest that their yields are significantly higher in terms of what they're achieving compared to that.
It also seems that January is the big differentiator here for this particular organization compared to others in the benchmark, right? That sort of
Absolutely.
line in the sand of from one quarter to the next is where overall, this is where they're, being able to show how far ahead they are in their advanced sales, but it's because of their advanced programming, that perhaps more of it extending into January than maybe their peers.
Yeah, absolutely. So this organization, 1,700 tickets sold for January compared to an average of 850. If we look at the revenues, even more, 44,000 compared to an average of about 18,000.
Great.
So that's it for me for today, Brad. That's taking us through two big new additions to the benchmark. They won't be the last additions. We've got more coming and hope to have some more functionality in the next week or two. But we've added to what was there before, which was the ticket sales and revenue year to date, and the revenue and ticket sales for the last 30 days. And we're using this last 30 days metric a lot within this, because we keep rolling and we keep seeing what's developing and happening. Just a reminder that if you went into any of these, so let's just look at our revenue for the last 30 days. It's showing us against the benchmark and us against last year. And we can get rid of some of these, so we can just compare ourselves against the benchmark. And what is another addition that you may not have seen before is the top right-hand corner. We now have a little video, which is again, you and me talking about this and how to make this work and why it's important.
More of us, David, in this tool. I love it.
I'm less sure.
David, I've got a question here asking about, do we know, what about the size of our data set here? Do we have a sense of how many organizations are participating, or what percentage of the sector is participating in the benchmark?
Yeah, so we've got a couple of hundred organizations in here, and it's growing day by day by day. In terms of the proportion of the sector, I don't want to be quoted on this, but when I did the sums, I think it was looking at about 60% of the combined revenue of UK Theatre and Society of London Theatre members. So it's not the whole sector. We'd love to have more people in here, but it's a very big and a very meaningful sample across the sector. Again, the more organizations we have in here, the more categories we can have for different types of venues. So we talked last time about, wouldn't it be lovely to have a festivals category? Agreed completely. Wouldn't it be lovely to have a big multidisciplinary art centre category? If you can tell your friends and encourage them to sign up, the quicker we'll get there.
Excellent. What other final thoughts do you have, David?
A big thank you to everybody who's engaged in this and using this. It's really important. The importance is being picked up on a national, now international basis. We are conversing with arts councils in the UK. Department of Culture, Media and Sport are really thankful that there is access to live or almost live data coming from UK venues. And now those conversations are growing overseas as well, with the National Endowment for the Arts in the US and Canada Council in Canada. So as we move forward with this within the next month or two, not only are we going to be able to provide you with useful figures against your peers, we're also going to be able to start looking at the UK picture versus the US picture versus the Canadian picture.
Wonderful, wonderful. All right. So just a reminder, while you have this screen up here, David, in the bottom left-hand corner there, you have links to send questions. This is where, again, you can tell us if you've got concerns about what your peer group is, what organizations you're being compared to, or if you just have questions about what insights, how to read into the insights that can't be answered, and some of the videos with a couple of handsome devils trying to walk you through it. Of course, we'd love to know what you think about the dashboard, and you can join us on the TRG side of things on our TRG 30 network over on LinkedIn, where our consulting team is responding to questions. They can be questions about the benchmark. They can be other operational, strategic questions regarding how you are responding in these times to remain engaged and adaptive and nimble in responding to the COVID-19 crisis, and in terms of your patrons and your culture and your mission. So there is the group there. You can see the link to get to the TRG 30 group. And I believe, David, we've got TRG now every Wednesday at 5. It's like a happy hour, 30-minute chat with TRG CEO Jill Robinson.
Absolutely, and growing all the time. I think we had over 800 organizations registered for last week's session. If you haven't been coming along, do join us. It's now at the same time every week, 5 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon. Perfect thing for a cup of tea.
And these are intended to be, bite size. It's just 30 minutes, but really densely packed with provocative insights, data we're finding across the entire sector globally, as well as some very tactical recommendations about what organizations can be doing in these times to both respond to their teams and respond to their communities and pushing their missions forward. All right. Thank you all so much for joining us this now afternoon. And I know David and I will look forward to chatting with you again soon when we have some additional insights to share on the benchmark. Thank you, David, for being our tour guide. It's really exciting stuff.
Thank you, Brad, for leading the way, and we'll look forward to seeing everybody again soon.
Great. Thanks, everybody.